Welcome to the Sons of Liberty podcast, coming to you from the Liberty Tree Studio in San Antonio, Texas, where we discuss topics of the day, firearms, great food, and even better whiskey. Grab a drink, sit down with your host, the founding daddies, Mike Mahalski and Kyle Grothus.
Howdy guys, welcome to the SOTW podcast, and we are here with Chad Albrecht and Jim Davis. Did I say that right?
You got it.
All right, tell us a little about yourself there, Chad.
For those that know me, I'm an AR nerd. Those of you who don't know me, I'm an AR nerd. I basically I gauge things, I test things. Some people make the wrong assumptions about what I do when it comes to gauging, but essentially I find parts that don't quite work well together, and I really take a deep dive to try to understand how I can identify that with future guns before that problem rears up again. And I developed that into a curriculum, and I teach classes to, check out your AR, what to look for, what to be concerned about, what to sort of say, okay, that'll be all right, don't worry about it. And I spend a lot of time doing it. Our 2-day classes are like 24 straight hours in 2 days. So it's a lot of material, fire hose type stuff.
And I'll tell you guys, so Chad, he is School of the American Rifle. I highly suggest checking him out on YouTube and Facebook and all the places where he's active. As an armorer instructor myself, and I travel the country teaching accredited classes, for government agencies or civilians, the industry. I can honestly tell you that Chad is one of the, I think, best resources of empirical good data on the AR. Having co-taught classes together and just having watched him over the years, I got to tell you, Chad is somebody that I go to for advice whenever I'm stumped on something. He's, if you're not familiar with him, I would highly suggest getting to know the guy a little bit. Dude, so I'm not even sure I know the answer to this. Technical.
Shit, sorry. Is our alarm to start the podcast now?
Yeah, so you and I have been friends for a long time, dude, and I'm not even sure I know this story. How did you get into this? What was your background? What led you to this journey?
I've always been a lover of guns. When I wasn't even old enough to really buy guns, my friend, I don't know, maybe I would get him in trouble for this, but I wasn't old enough to really be in a gun store, and I would leave high school afterwards, and I'd walk over to the gun store, and if there were people in the store, he'd be like, you can't be here, get out of here, dude. And then when no one was around, he'd be like, you want to look at some guns? So we became friends. His name's Scott Scharf. He was my mentor. So he had a little shop, retail. He was mainly a gunsmith. He was trained by Colorado School of Trades. He graduated in the very early 80s. So he had been doing it a long time. Him and his dad ran the store. His dad, a few years after that, got cancer, passed away, and he was really struggling to just stay afloat, run the store, work on guns, the typical, being in business, doing gun stuff, right? It's hard, doing the retail side and customer support. And he had seen how I tinker with stuff, and he was like, look, I think that you have the knack for working on guns. You're sort of an artist in a way. And he took me under his wing. He apprentice trained me like the old school way of apprenticing someone, and taught me, what not to do because he's done it wrong many times. So he saved me a lot of pitfalls. So he trained me, and that's how I became a gunsmith, basically doing that for 13 years. And there was some changes in another job that I did where I couldn't work on guns anymore. And when that happened, I made the decision that, okay, well, if I can't dedicate my time to working on a little bit of everything, I'm going to dedicate it to my favorite thing that I've really locked down data about, the AR. And I started teaching classes, and it wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was Will Larson was teaching classes at the time, and the thing that I tried to do is not come across as I was doing something different, as in being perceived as better, but just teaching how I learned things and how I've made mistakes, and trying to tell people maybe you should avoid these things so you don't make these mistakes, sort of like what my mentor did with me. And I created a curriculum of working on the AR from a gunsmith's perspective, if that makes sense.
Right.
Or the armor, you replace parts that are bad, where I was like, okay, well, this is slightly bad. Can we fix this? And there's always a point where you say, no, if I fix this, it's not trustworthy. So I tried to create just a lesson to talk about how you should replace stuff when it needs to be, how you can fix stuff if possible, and how you should abandon stuff. And I was always very data-driven about stuff. I didn't like just taking a gun and replacing a part, and it started working and saying, okay, yay, I fixed it. I wanted to know why that part was a problem. And I really dug deep about, why this firing pin does this or why this hammer does this. And it's not always 100%, but at least it can drive you in the right direction when you're trying to do diagnostics or building a gun for a certain purpose to eliminate a lot of little ghosts in the machine. And I try my best. So that's why I do what I do. But he gave me the foundation to be a gunsmith, and then I added the armor stuff, and it just sort of took off. I didn't expect anything to happen out of it. It was all a big accident.
I think that's a really important distinction that sometimes is lost on folks, the giant difference between being a gunsmith and being an armorer. I teach armorer schools, and what we teach is like, when in doubt, replace, or if that part is not quite right, replace, like that, like your default is replace. Whereas, the gunsmithing thing, that you're going in there and you're going to repair, you're comfortable potentially materially altering something or dimensionally altering something in order for it to make it work. And that's something that is, again, people ask me that, I say, I hear you're a gunsmith. I'm like, no, that is like an old world craft that I just don't have. I don't know how to reblue a barrel, or I couldn't finish a stock for you. People bring me their lever action rifles to work on, and I'm like, I have no fucking idea. That's not my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And that's what I learned being a gunsmith. I got exposed to a little bit of everything as far as the gun technical side, and I get to pick what I really had a knack for. Like, I can make springs, and I can checker things, and I can blue things, and I can parkerize things, and solder, and weld, and forge, and all those things. My mentor taught me those things. But what I never liked about working on guns as a general gunsmith is always chasing different projects, right? So you got 10 different guns you have to work on in a week, and you don't have parts for 6 of them. And maybe you have to make parts for 3 of them and order parts for the other ones, and they're from different sources, and you can't get parts, and people are like, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Which is what you guys do with your products, right? People are always like, is it done yet? We live in an instant gratification world. And I got sick of trying to work on everything in a way.
Right.
And I just wanted to focus on one gun that I knew that I could stock parts up on, quickly evaluate, diagnose, and fix without having to chase my tail to make something work. And that's what's beautiful about the AR is that unless you deviate from the mil-spec dimension parts, TDP, everything's for the most part compatible, right? But that's where I teach the correction method is, it's not, is this part perfect? Is this part perfect? It's 2 imperfect parts. Can we make them work together?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. That's something that's lost a lot. And like, these are some of the conversations that I find frustrating online whenever, you see people arguing about, a port size or about a carrier key or about, something that just enough about to be dangerous. Like, just enough about to kind of like, maybe ask a question, but you might not know enough about to actually solve the problem, and then you see like these kind of debates amongst people that haven't really devoted that level of study to it. and it's frustrating to say the least, because just because something has, gauges at, at X does not mean that it's not actually the better solution to pair with something else, that you get like a stacking tolerance issue. Sometimes you can stack those tolerances in your favor. As a matter of fact, that's the goal. You always want to stack the tolerances in your favor, as opposed to just discarding something for not being good, or just, you have to understand that. I always joke that your gun is only as good as its shittiest part. Mm-hmm. And so, and then on top of that, you have to actually understand the recipe. One of the things I teach in class, and we've talked about several times, is you'll see somebody want to go out there and build a super gun. So they go out there and they Google and they get on the forums and they're on Reddit and they, what's the best fucking barrel ever to exist ever? Well, first of all, best barrel for what? What purpose, right? Then they come to an answer and they go pick this barrel. Then they go do the same search on what's the best bolt carrier group ever made, blah, 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 blah. They go buy that. And same thing with buffer systems, whatever. And now you've gone and you've cobbled together all of these parts that were never designed to actually work together and you have a gun made of very expensive, high quality parts, maybe the best in their class for, you know, each individual component, but you have a gun that just doesn't work because you didn't put that level of the systems level thought behind it. You know, you might have a gun with a really conservative gas port paired with a BCG that has a third weep hole that's meant to exhaust more gas, you know, paired by a very heavy buffer, and all of those things are trying to manage carrier speed. But they're all acting against each other in this particular recipe, you know.
Yeah, and one of the groups that I run to try to recreate the classroom environment for those that just don't have maybe the finances or the ability to travel to take a class. I try to put a lot of free information out there to help people as much as possible.
You really do.
With some people, it's never good enough, and they complain about that. But I have to make a living, right? I can't give away the farm, and I try to push that, you know, that firing pin that sticks out too much. Don't call the manufacturer about that and complain. Put that in a baggie and put long, and then when you have another bolt that's out of spec, now you have your fix. So it's not about what's best. I mean, that's not for everybody, right? You have to have a level of understanding to understand that that part is a fix, where most people will be like, it's bad. You guys make a part, you have to make sure it's in a range so it works with as many bolts on the market for that firing pin, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it will, because another company had a different standard for what's right. And that's all I try to teach. It's just how they should work together optimally. It doesn't mean that if it doesn't meet my standards, it's not going to work. It's just I've seen where it might not work, and then you add another little issue and another little issue, and then that little snowball turns into a big snowball. And that's all that I try to transfer to people. Is just, here's some data, take it or leave it.
Do you find it frustrating that when you're trying to explain kind of a nuanced or complicated, highly technical idea, you know, that's multi-part, you know, and it requires some level of thought? Is it frustrating to communicate with people that will like cherry pick a sentence out of that, or you know, or not quite understand the again, like the systems level approach to it? As I see you online, try your best to have these conversations, and sometimes I feel bad for you because you're sometimes you're talking to someone who has nothing to learn.
And a lot of people don't want to even really learn, right? They just want to argue, right?
Or they're convinced that their sample size of one is the absolute end-all be-all, even though, you know, you've probably seen 10,000 of them. I know that's something we have to fight with, is the difference between trying to build the best complete gun as a system, but also building parts that account for people's idiocy. You know, that could we make the gas port smaller and work on one of our guns is something we talk about a lot. Yeah, but, you know, you can have some guy go put it with a bunch of other, you know, manufacturers' parts that don't really belong and run a bunch of shitty ammo, and it's not going to work. So
that's a good point. Yeah, when we're trying to, like, when you're doing production level guns and you're sending them out to, you know, the world, right? You know, you send 10 pallets to RSR and they distribute it to one of their 70,000 dealers. You don't know who's going to buy that gun. You don't know what kind of ammo they're going to feed it. You don't know what kind of maintenance schedule they're going to have. You don't know really anything. I mean, you know,
you'd be in fucking Antarctica.
yeah. I mean, is it in the super cold, or are they doing OTB? You know, or they live next to the coast? I mean, you know, what are they doing with that gun? And so you're trying to build a weapon with the largest and most forgiving operational envelope to satisfy all of that. When we build guns for special projects, well, then, you know, that gun looks a little different, you know, because the ammunition that we're feeding it is a given. Like, this is the ammo we feed it. We don't ever, you know, this group of folks here, they don't go to fucking Academy and buy what's on sale. You know, like this is all they'll ever feed the gun. It's pretty, man, I love doing stuff like that, because you can really start to dial stuff in and really hone it out. And like, or hey, this is the suppressor that we're going to use. This is the ammo that we're going to use. And then, man, you can, wow, what a sweet gun, man. Shootable, reliable, tough, you know. It's all of our guns are shootable, reliable, and tough. You know, I'm just saying, like, you know, you can really fine tune something if you knew the variables. And unfortunately, in the commercial market, it's impossible to know the variables. There's Uncle Cletus reloads that you buy in a Ziploc bag at the gun show.
Yeah, well, we got guys that run like really super hot ammo, like, oh, the gun's got too much gas. I'm like, yeah, but we are, you know, you're on this end of the spectrum on ammo. We also got to account for this guy over here that, you know, is running shit that's like 2,500 feet per second out of a 16-inch barrel and barely runs the damn gun.
One of the things I was pretty proud of myself, I'll pat ourselves on the back for, is the way we were gassing guns, always with suppressor use in mind. There was this trend for a while in the industry to try to drive the gas port as small as you can, and like make suppressed only or suppressor optimized barrels, and we never did that. We always gassed the guns and run well unsuppressed, and then not be outside of the operational envelope when you plug the fucking suppressor on, right? Well, fast forward a couple of years, look at the entire trend of the suppressor industry, and everybody is moving through either a flow through or a low back pressure can, to where our gas ports that were designed to run reliably unsuppressed have almost minimal carrier speed increase whenever you put that suppressor on there. And then the dudes that had like these suppressor optimized barrels, well, when you throw like a really good low pressure can on there, you might not like the results. So, I mean, for us, hey, Sons Liberty customers, you don't have to change shit.
Break out the drill bits.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The other trend that you see all over the internet with people that have a little bit of information is talking about whether or not manufacturers really manufacture, right? So,
oh man, here we go.
Awesome. We went out for dinner last night, right?
Yeah.
Great dinner. And
that was pretty cool.
Were you concerned whether or not they raised the food they fed the cows? And did they raise the cows? And did they butcher the cows? Was it still a good meal?
Yeah, that was an amazing meal. And no, I didn't expect to see somebody back there skinning a cow. That would concern me.
But they didn't raise and butcher the cow, so you can't possibly have a good product, right?
Yeah,
that's the same analogy people use. Like if you're not making every little screw and pin in house, then you're no one.
Yeah, so that is a criticism that we get a lot from the uninformed, and it's mostly from we get that criticism from the most uninformed people, right? I mean, you can kind of tell where somebody falls on the whether or not they know what the fuck they're talking about spectrum based upon that kind of criticism. And yeah, you're 100% right. There are companies that I'm aware of that make almost everything in house, and they make almost everything in house poorly. And then there's companies that, I'm not going to name names out of industry etiquette, that make virtually nothing in-house, and they make a pretty goddamn good rifle. So what people don't understand about the OEM process is that you're taking prints that your own engineers came up that's unique to you, right? You've created a print, and if someone's ever seen like an engineering print, it's quite detailed. You take that to a machine house, and then they have to make that, and then we have to be able to QC and reject or accept that part. So no, like it wasn't physically machined under our house, but that barrel or that gas block or that receiver or that rail or whatever that is, it only exists because it came out of our heads. Okay, and then our engineers came up with it. It was machined deliberately for us to our intellectual property, and then it was QC'd and inspected to make sure that it met our tolerance. And then it goes out. What people think is like, oh, well, I know who makes so-and-so's bolts. Like, okay, that tells you about 10% of what you might need to know. Like, oh, you know who made that bolt. Okay, great. Do you know, like, all of the checklist of things that specific manufacturer required that specific OEM to do? Like, do you know every single thing? Because I promise you, there's a long, long menu, and not everyone checks every box. Especially if we have some of the new stuff we have coming out that is completely proprietary. We're having to get new materials and cryo treatments and blah 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 whatever. But yeah, that's a good point. How do you address that whenever you're talking to people that bring up that question? Because I know you get it all the time.
The part that I always struggle with in the way that I teach is that I talk about how parts work together, but the big unknown is, do you trust who you bought the item from? Is it made of what they say that it is, right? We can say these parts should work like this, right? But is it really made of Carpenter 158? Is it really made of 9310? Whatever the material of the bolt is the firing pin made of the right material, the extractor? You really don't know. And in most cases, to actually know what it is, you have to do like material testing. Send it into a laboratory to make sure that it's made of what they claim that it is. And you've mentioned this in the past before about how you guys mark your bolts, and I agree with that. Like, you guys are proud enough about what you sell. People don't see what you don't sell.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
They don't see what doesn't make it out the door. but you're willing to say, this is mine, right?
Talking about, what they tell you and what they don't, and are they telling the truth? We were having a conversation with, I was having a conversation with a barrel OEM years ago, and something they brought up was like, hey, we'd made like 10,000, because we were talking about lasering on the barrels and the proof marks and all the other stuff. And they're like, well, you can put up whatever the fuck you want on it. And they're like, that's not our problem, and he told me a story about they had made a bunch of barrels for somebody that had 223 wild chambers, but the customer had marked them 5.56, and he's like, I've never made a 5.56 barrel in my life. He's like, I don't even know what a 5.56 reamer. He's like, they just thought that's what would sell better, and that's what they put on the barrel. And even though it's a very slight difference, they're still full of shit, And that's one of the things you got to worry about. I mean, is it actually 158 Carpenter, or they, is it Chinese pot metal? I mean, I know. We heard a story one time at Shot about a company that was making bolts at a 8620. I mean, they're just crazy stuff that goes on, and either they're not telling you or they're could be lying.
Well, I've told the story on this podcast before, but remember that company that copied and pasted our product description?
Yeah,
even to include like our
typos,
the typos
yeah.
and
the logos,
engraved with the rebellious stripes. I'm like, do you now? Do you? I think they were like, I'm not gonna name the name, but yeah. So, are they telling the truth? That's a big one. Another thing too, we always tell people is like, pay attention to what a company tells you, but also pay attention to what they don't tell you. And like the more educated you get about the platform, the better you can read a product description. And if there's any ambiguity in that product, it's usually for a reason. And if you look at like the product descriptions of companies that really do give a shit, like BCM and Psionics and Sons and these guys, their product descriptions are extremely detailed. Materials, testing, processes, the standards at which something's done, because we're really proud of what we're offering our customer. And so like there's no ambiguity. If somebody offers you something and says, hey, it's
it's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, mil spec. That's it. That's the entire product description. I'd be a little suspect.
I had a student of mine reach out to me. He worked for an agency, and they were doing a bid on carbines, and he didn't tell me who it was. And he was like, this particular bid seems interesting, and he concealed who it was, but he gave me the product data sheet. And I'm reading down it, and I was like, that's a Son's Liberty gun. He was like, how the hell did you know that? And I was like, I know. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, it's a Son's rifle.
One of the analogies I've always made is like cars. And like you have the Toyota plant here. I mean, Toyota doesn't make any of the shit that goes in that car. They assemble it at the end of the day. But, the engine plant's across the street run by somebody else. But, they design that engine. They have somebody else make it. I mean, we see the frames. We get stopped by the frickin' train of frames, once a week. And then they also make Lexus. They make a nicer brand of car. It probably uses the same engine guy, but it's a way nicer engine.
I think the issue is that people think that if you have something OEM'd, that all you're doing is taking a stock generic product off of like a shelf and lasering your logo onto it and then sticking it into a gun. In my mind, I think that like 67% of Reddit thinks that's how OEM manufacturing works, that here's a barrel, we found it in this alley, let's laser our fucking name on it. I'm like, that's a little bit more than that. I mean, and I'll be honest, look at Son's Liberty as an example. I was extremely transparent about everything we did, who OEM, everything we did. And if it was that easy, then any two assholes in a lumberyard could have built a company as disruptive as ours that became the fastest growing rifle company in the country. If all you were doing was just buying off the shelf stuff and lasering your fucking name on it, then there should be 5,000 Sons of Liberties. Because it's, any two assholes with a credit card could do it, right? There's not. Like, we were pretty disruptive for what we did, and we are the fastest growing rifle company in this space. So if it's just lasering our name on shit, explain why everyone else hasn't done the same thing with the same level of success.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the whole restaurant analogy. That was something I was starting to kind of talk with Chad about on the flight down. And it really kind of resonated with me. I mean, maybe because I like food and stuff like that. But this whole, like, hey, if you don't raise your own cattle, like, does that mean that your steaks suck at your restaurant? Like, get out of here. Like, so you're going to tell me that, like, you have a choice. You can eat at Gordon Ramsay's restaurant where he, like, special orders his beef in from, Snake River Farms or whatever it is. Or you can go to some dude, right, who's been a cattle farmer for 20 years and decided last week he's going to have his own restaurant. Like, you're going to tell me that his product is better? Like, no. Like, I'd rather go have pot roast, that Thomas Keller made than have Wagyu at Wendy's. Like, the knowledge that goes into producing that product is like the critical difference. And it's like we were talking about, like, just because you think you can go to the same OEMs that you think we use, like, okay, let's see your rifle. Let's go out and shoot it.
That one particular chef, he was describing how they like cook asparagus, right? They take asparagus and they bundle it, right?
Yep.
And they drop the fat end to the water first because the fat end doesn't cook as fast as the skinny end. And it's like, well, that resonates with me because people are like, why is Chad always doing all that weird crap with stuff? And it's because I'm trying to create a process that might not make sense without the information, but I'm still telling you about the process. If you want to learn about it, you can come to my class, but otherwise I wouldn't talk about it if I didn't have a reason for doing it. I'm just making up stuff. I have a reason for doing it that way.
The fucking asparagus wasn't properly heat treated.
Yeah, exactly.
And he told me about like a book for a certain French chef.
We were talking about Keller.
Yeah, and Kyle's big
By the
into
way,
cooking,
I'm like
right?
the only not foodie here. There's like I got Jim, our deputy sales director down here. Kyle, Chad, are you a foodie?
I like to cook. I'm not nowhere near chef level, but when he was telling me about how Kyle likes to cook, I'm like, well, is Kyle going to be cooking for us? I was starting to salivate on the plane.
By the way, you're on the hook for tonight, Kyle. So.
These guys, he's more into. He's probably more into cooking than I am into guns, dude. So that says a lot.
But I like to draw a lot of analogies with that kind of stuff because I think there is a lot of crossover about people that really try to be the best at their craft, right? They're going to find these little tiny things they do about how they're preparing something. And that's what I believe about what I do. And I see it when I look around this place and when I work on one of your guns that somebody says, I need this changed out, Chad. I see the effort that doesn't exist no matter who makes the product. There's effort that has to go into that.
I mean, talking about Thomas Keller, he actually clips all the leaves off of his asparagus and then he actually like skins it with a Brillo pad.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing. Yeah, it's velvet. It's really good.
But no, it's like
all
thinking.
the prep. It's like,
and you can taste this, right? When you prepare something, it's not like a psychological thing, right?
It's like I didn't go through all the, I didn't cut all the leaves off for nothing. Yeah, you can taste the difference.
It's legit. I mean, thinking before, so when I took your class a couple of years ago, we knew a lot of the same people, which I thought was kind of funny. Like we kind of ran into each other and we're like, holy crap, like we know like 10 of the same people. We live like an hour apart, right? But my knowledge of you and your materials was very much through like YouTube and social media, and I think a lot of the content that you've been putting out and that you still do, right, is that you're looking at one part kind of in isolation, right? It's just this bolt carry gripper, it's just this barrel, or it's just this upper, and in the first 15 minutes into your class, it was like, no, it's about the harmony, right? It's the interaction, it's the second and third and fourth order consequences of how all these things are playing together. And I think it's easy to miss that, I think, sometimes in some of your material. And I believe there are people out there that don't understand the way that you're looking at guns and how similarly we're so much like we're 99% after the same thing. And we're like, there was an example of something like you discovered a flaw with a gauge, whereas we discovered a flaw with like a case of ammunition. And it was like, okay, like we found the same variable. We discovered the same thing. We're after the same thing, and we're going to resolve the problem the same way. We just use a different diagnostic method.
And how much money and ammo did you spend to find the problem?
About 2.5 gauges worth.
I was about to say, that's a gauge.
No, for you guys that don't know, and by the way, we at Sons Liberty, we use Chad's gauges, and actually we're getting a couple more for some specialty stuff we're working on. We use Chad's gauges here at the professional level because a lot of folks don't realize this. Chad makes his own gauges because he could not find an OEM that, or a tool or gauge maker that would make them as precise as he actually needed to get like the true readings on things. And so if you get a gauge from School of the American Rifle, you made that thing. Like by hand. How long does it take to make a gauge?
I make this.
Depending on the gauge, between 3 and 6 hours, depending on the complexity. Because, I have headspace gauges that I'll modify. I like to say modify because I'm using an existing headspace gauge, but I modify them so you can use it on an assembled bolt, right? Not a new concept, but really nobody makes that unless you ask someone to custom grind it. I'll actually put paint on the gauge, so with a visual identification, I can see, okay, the red one is the field gauge. Do I need to put paint on the gauge? No. But now someone who's using that gauge can just take a visual check. The red one is field, green one is the 223 go, the blue one is the 556 go. Because the numbers might wear off, right? There's all people are handling them. So those little things always add more. I'll stamp like old school, like with a number punch or a letter punch, what the gauge is. Someone in your shop environment, if they had a gauge holder and said, okay, well, we're checking out carrier keys, they don't need that engraved that says gas key gauge, right?
Right.
But I put it on there, so that adds time. And some companies just they don't see the application when I try to get someone to manufacture something in volume. I would love to make the gauges for the general public at the lowest possible price. And now I take criticism because I don't have them for sale on my website, and I only sell them to students. So people draw the conclusion that, well, Chad is telling you he won't sell you gauges unless you take a class. This is a trick. I'm going to come to a class, learn nothing, just so I can get his gauges that are pointless. I only sell the gauges to students because I can only make so much of them because I only have so much time. I'm one-man shop when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't have a crew of guys doing it. And when I've tried to teach people to do it, they don't do it to my standards. So I guess I'm sort of stubborn that way. I'm sure you guys have seen
No,
this.
man, it's called having a standard, you know. And the other thing too is that what's the point of having like a highly sophisticated gauge if you don't know how to actually use it? You know, one of the frustrating phone calls I used to get is somebody would buy a gun that's been like test fired over like 5 different stages here at the shop, and it ships out every single gun. I mean, you can see the test fire all over the gun. And they get home, they bought a gun off the rack. They go home and they try to gauge something. They're like, hey man, I'm experiencing some amount of headspace issue with this gauge or whatever, and or something with the bolt, and a severe headspace issue is going to manifest itself really really quickly. If you're trying when you're at test fire, right? So we're pretty confident that's not correct. And then as you talk to the dude, you ask him, well, does your gauge require you to disassemble the bolt? And and so there's a lot of people out there with a lot of gauges that are improperly using them, and I would imagine that they're getting some very very confusing results.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to add something to your cart. It's a whole other thing to effectively use it properly. To know that everything is clean, that everything is oiled, that it's in the correct temperature. Like all of these things that go into this, and without having that knowledge and experience, whether it's from some machining world that you were professional in, or it's participating in Chad's class, like just having that tool sitting on your bench doesn't do anything for you if you don't know how to use it.
Chad, over the last couple of years, I'm sorry to change direction a little bit. Mm-hmm. Over the last couple of years, during the pandemic, during the rush that we saw, what was your experience with overall the quality of, overall across the entire industry? What did you see?
I was stuck between a rock and a hard place because the only thing you have to bring to my class is a box of parts to build into a gun, or a gun that's already built that we rip apart and we put back together, right? And people are always asking, what should I buy to bring to your class? They're always worried about sort of like the tiers, right? But everybody,
we're gonna go into that here in a bit.
They come and they're like, I bought expensive stuff to Chad's class because I was afraid that he was going to crap on my selection, right? So I spent probably more than what my wallet could afford, and then he's looking around or she's looking around the class, and it's like, wait a minute, that dude over there's got a $400 parts kit. How are we going to make that work? And then I go through where the deficiencies are on that $400 parts kit. Can you get a good build out of that? No, but we can change this, and this, tweak this, and if everything else specs out, maybe the material isn't right, but the gun will work up until a point. And that's really what I'm trying to push in the class. So people would say, what should I buy? And my answer was nothing. And they're like, whoa, you're telling me I need to bring parts to your class, and you're saying that everything sucks? And I'm like, mostly. Mostly. And this wasn't directed at you guys, but I didn't see as many problems with your products. But I also know that unless I'm here working for you guys, it's very dangerous for me to say, Sons of Liberty makes a great product. Buy it. But I have no control whether or not you guys decide to keep making good stuff, right? Maybe you just switch gears and said, you know what, the bottom line is the better value here for us. We're not going to keep doing things the way we should do it, right?
Wow.
And I struggle with making recommendations because I can't keep up with that. And if the quality goes down, people are like, well, he used to recommend this. He doesn't know anything because I've seen problems with it. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. Like I said, like
I'm not involved in that process, so I try to stay as neutral as possible.
Companies that are known for QC, they're gonna have tighter QC even whenever everything goes to shit. And like so, you know, like during the last couple of years, whether it was COVID or materials issues or you know whatever it was, our rejection rates went through the roof. I mean, that's why I was, whenever you were working on guns these last couple of years, did you notice the stuff that was actually making it to market was less than optimal?
It was terrible.
Terrible. Ammunition quality has gone to shit in the last couple of years.
A good class without a lot of problems is roughly 2 12-hour days when I teach it. And we were running till 2 in the morning on classes. It was, instead of ending at 8 p.m., we started at 8 in the morning, go to 8 p.m. We were like still trying to fix stuff at like 2 in the morning. And I'm like dragging rear. Like I'm tired, right? I've been standing on my feet today for 16, 17, 18 hours. And everybody is in the class like, they're so happy because they're learning all this weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's a really good learning thing, but I have to strike a balance of let's get through the material. Let's teach you as much as I can. But in reality, you can't absorb all that info. So I tell people, if you come to my class as a student, you're always free to come back at no charge to sit in and watch, to observe, to help me out. And they're like, really? I can come back in the future? I was like, whenever you want. You hang out with me. I'll feed you lunch. You can help me pass out stuff and, you know, help people that have problems if you're confident in it. But I always want to continue trying to give those who trusted me to teach them that continued level of education, to keep that edge sharp as they continue to use it. It might get dull. And I take stuff out of my classes that I think isn't as important, and I add stuff that I think is more important, because you can learn a lot of stuff on the internet if you know what to look for. So I try to add the stuff that isn't readily available on the internet, and people are like, wow, that really makes sense now. I've watched your videos and it never really clicked with me. I'm like, well, I've actually explained it, but if I've made 50 bolt carrier group videos, I maybe explained it twice because I try not to repeat myself too much.
Right.
I can't win.
It gets even monotonous for me, though, because, like, I know that the guys in the shop, my sales guys, are like, Mike, can you get up there and make a video about this? Can you do some more? I'm like, man, like, it's hard to make the same video 50 times. You know, it gets a little monotonous, you know? What were some of the most common problems or, like, the most prevalent issues you saw manifest in the...
Through COVID?
Yeah.
All that stuff?
Yeah.
The main issues were between the bolt and barrel interface and the firing pin and bolt interface.
Really?
I would say 40% of guns in the COVID period had insufficient or excessive protrusion of the firing pin, which can manifest itself in different types of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And headspace, consistently short. And I know why, because most of the manufacturers who make headspace gauges use the wrong spec for 5.56.
Now, for the guys out there that are more nerdy types, let's try to explain what the consequence, though, is of starting out with a short headspace.
All right, so if you look at weapons that have like higher rates of fire, like a saw, right, and you compare the headspace spec of that and 5.56 to an M4, like it's the same caliber, right? Why does the saw have a headspace spec that's more generous before it reaches field? And it's because the weapon gets hotter, and as the weapon gets hotter, the chamber actually gets shorter in length as the barrel heats up. So think of it like a bottle, right? If you were to blow a bunch of pressure in this bottle, it gets bigger this way, chamber.
Right.
Chamber gets shorter.
Yeah.
Right? So with high rates of fire on a gun that already has headspace right on the very edge of being tight, it gets tighter when it gets hot.
Sure.
And it's the difference between a hobbyist gun that you shoot paper, shoot around every 10 seconds, to one that you are trying to burn it down.
Yeah.
Right? And then you take environmental factors into play. But these guns were having issues just closing on a 223 go. Right? So you have trouble with the gun going in the battery. You have the trouble with the gun extracting. Just overall, just ghost in the machine that'll drive a person crazy.
Yeah, and then now introduce heat, not introduce fouling, or introduce pressure that's going to, have a little bit more bolt thrust or something, right? I mean, and these problems exasperate very quick. This is not an academic thing. That was the other thing I want to talk about. I want to give you say this for you. These issues that that we discuss when we get kind of into the weeds on stuff, they're not academic. I mean, you can see them manifest into malfunction. So we're like, again, like Jim was saying, we use ammunition as our, tool, and then Chad's using some really sophisticated gauges. But at the end of the day, we come to the same answer. And so, if you're talking about short headspace, okay, well, maybe you don't have the problem with that because you shoot at a static range, and your entire schedule of fire might be 30 rounds for that day, or you go out and you shoot a hog in the ass, and the gun worked just fine. But take that gun to a carbine course, right, where you're going to be shooting maybe 1,000 rounds a day, and I promise you're going to start seeing those issues manifest into real problems. Now, imagine that scenario where your life may count on it, right? I mean, so that's just, I guess the rifle makers that look at rifles as legitimate life-saving tools, these are the little nuanced details that make it different.
I'll give you one on that. So, like, thinking about it from my history, kind of on the LE sales side and stuff like that. There's a lot of customers that I worked with that had a gun, right, and they didn't have a suppressor yet, and they shot that gun and they were happy with that gun, and then they added a suppressor to it, and then all of these problems show up, and they're naturally inclined to look at the suppressor and be like, that's the problem, right? I have a good gun. Suppressor's the problem, and that's because that rifle manufacturer, the brand that they have, was not constructed with the anticipation that it was going to be subjected to the stress of firing suppressed. And that's one of the ways I strongly believe, before I came to work here, was that was the way that Sons of Liberty set itself apart. Yeah.
So in my opinion, a suppressor will make a good gun more reliable. Like, a suppressor will open the operational envelope of a good rifle. A suppressor will exasperate any weakness in a shit rifle. So if you have a weapon, see, I would love for full auto to be completely civilian legal. Number one, because the Second Amendment, and I'm a purist for the Second Amendment. And number two, because I would love for people to see how big of a piece of shit their rifle is. Because full auto doesn't lie. And if you start subjecting guns to the actual full auto fire, then you start to see that some of these little dings, really come into effect. I would love for that, because honestly, it would immediately raise the standard of rifle making across the entire industry if your gun had to survive select fire. Yep.
For those of you who may not have tested something with a machine gun in the AR family of weapons, you can have a gun that will run with the wrong weight buffer in semi-auto. Put it on a machine gun lower with that same buffer and spring, and you're going to get clicks instead of bangs. All kinds of weird stuff's going to happen that you would never think of. And those same people that are like, I don't know why my gun ain't running, are the people giving advice in different areas of the internet.
So that leads me to the conversation of the tiers. There seems to be this weird obsession with everybody to categorize things into like good, better, best, or like high tier, low tier, mid tier, whatever. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a complete gun. It could be a fucking charge and handle. It could be whatever. And like the more professional end users that we work with, the guys that actually shoot a lot and that are actually like, their job is shooting people, they don't seem to approach it like that. They don't refer to like the tier chart when it comes to, or if you like, submit a weapon for empirical data testing, like they're like a lab, they don't come back and say, well, we rated your gun. We would say it's somewhere between mid and high, so like there's an actual empirical performance standard. How did the tier chart start? What the fuck is it based on? What is the obsession with people to do this? And how is it quantifiable, I suppose? Can you quantify this?
No, because it changes so fast.
Oh, man, I see the guys that do it just on price. It's like, oh, man, my gun's $4,000. And it's got all this extra machining on it. I'm like, it's an expensive piece of shit. Good job.
Yeah, so there's
So you're telling me, Kyle, when you're thinking about using a new company's product, you don't turn to the internet and look at the chart to make that decision?
No. Side by
Look, see that one right there. See the one with the HK on there?
yeah,
That one. Yeah,
that's
let's
a good
pull it.
one.
Let's pull it. Let's see what this doctor.
But you can't fight that. This is like fighting a tidal wave of stupidity.
Okay, so top tier. This is like the toppest of the toppy top tier, and they have LMT, Knights, HK, Barrett, LaRue, Panel Defense, Radian, LWRC, and Hodge Defense, and then these are the very top guns voted on by like at least 300 to 400 16-year-olds on some forum. Okay,
Mom, where's the meatloaf?
All right, let's go to the A tier. Okay, this is fucking hilarious. So the A tier is Geisley, SIG, American Defense, BCM, Wilson Combat.
Oh God, yeah.
FN, hey, Sons of Liberty, Sons of Liberty, yeah,
We did it, Dad.
Colts, and then I think that's
Seekins.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Then we go down to the B tier. And this is the B tier. We have Faxon, CMMG, Arrow, New Frontier, Ruger, and then C tier is
Is that Springfield in there too?
Yep.
Rock River.
I love that
Listen.
there's two brands on there that are the same fucking company and they're in different tiers.
Oh yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Why not?
So now I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, okay, well, there's a couple of brands up here that I think are high performance rifles, that are legitimately high performance rifles that are seeking solutions to real problems, and they're trying to enhance the lethality of the platform. You can see it in some of the projects they work on. And then there are some companies up here that are really driven by like cosmetic machining or whiz-bang kind of bullshit. How would you quantify? It's like, this is not a knock at HK at all. I'm not knocking HK at all. Like, as a matter of fact, I have a 416 Delta, a real one, and I think it's a really cool gun in its place in gun history. But almost everyone I know professionally that has carried the 416 Delta has been pretty excited when it's time to trade it in for something else. So I'm not saying that the 416 is a bad rifle. It's a great rifle. But I'm just curious, how do you think, is it reputational? Is it marketing? Because, I mean, I promise you that fucking BCM rifle, and you put that BCM rifle against any gun on the top line, okay, if you run a 10,000 round string, and at the end of the day, you both recorded 0 observable malfunctions, I would have no problem putting that BCM gun against any gun on that top line in terms of absolute, like, just reliability. So then what's next? Shootability, features? I mean,
It's whatever gets you the most likes on Instagram, right? Whatever has the shiniest components and the most unique machining, and right.
well, out of industry etiquette, I have to bite my tongue on a lot of stuff, but I can honestly say that like some of the reputations of certain things are mechanically and materially not earned.
So yeah,
One of the companies on that list there, on A tier, get crapped on all the time by all the internet experts, and they're probably one of the most consistent guns that you can buy without worrying about it. If we take yours out of the picture, you probably know which one I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A tier.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Right?
Yeah.
If you actually inspect things, they have very little forgiveness for what's inside the gun, but they'll say that it's just a roll mark. They'll say that there's scratches on it when I buy it. It's a tool to that company. They're not worried about what the outside looks like, but they're very particular about the chamber, the efficiency of the bolt carrier, all the things that really matter about driving the gas system on the gun.
Now, let me ask you, do you think it still holds true today?
Yeah, it's almost 70 years of no give. Like, I can take examples that have been fired a lot, and people are like, well, you look for wear with your gauges for both. That's not what I use the gauges for. They're not wear gauges in most cases. It's whether or not it's the right dimension. Right?
I'm going to go ahead and I'll say it. Colt. So we're talking about a Colt. And this is kind of a funny story because this happens to me all the time. Like, I'll find myself in a gun store somewhere randomly, and I'm there like trying to find some like 17 HMR ammos. I'm taking my kid shooting or something, right? And I'll hear the guy behind the counter talking to some customer and they're asking like, man, like there's that Ruger 5.56 and that Colt, like why is that one $300 more? And then the guy behind the counter like, look, man, you're just paying for the name. And that's usually whenever I like leap into action. And I'm like,
You rip open your shirt. Do
Yeah,
you know
I'm
who I am?
yeah, I'm like
That's the only shirt he owns.
like I'm like, that's complete bullshit. And then I start going through the gun from muzzle to fucking butt, and I'm telling you, like, materially processes the staking, everything. Like you said, the chambers, like they own the TDP. And so no, that is the yardstick of guns. Now I have heard people say that they have seen a change over the last few years, that a 6920 from 2008 is different than a 6920 from today. I have not personally observed that, but I hear this persistent thing on the internet. Is that another internet myth, or have you seen any kind of quantifiable difference in the later guns you've inspected?
Sometimes, yes. But the question I normally ask is, and I think Colt sort of hurts themselves with this because they stopped marking some of their like carriers with like the little C mark on it, right?
Why do they do that?
I don't know.
Because that thing meant something. That C meant the big deal.
They used to stamp it, and I may be off with this, but if I remember correctly, I saw a difference between carriers when I was using pin gauges that were stamped with the C compared to ones that were laser engraved. So as they stamp that C, the carrier 3 bore gets crushed when they roll mark it.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting.
So if you laser engrave it, you're not putting pressure on it, right? Now, I'm not sure if that's the reason they went away from it, or maybe roll marks are more expensive of a process than laser engraving, but they don't put the markings on there at all. And I have caught, this is more of a local problem, shops that upgrade guns. So they'll have a Colt on the rack, and they're going to upgrade it and put a nickel boron bolt carrier group in it, right?
Mhm.
And then the Colt has a problem, and Colt sucks because the bolt carrier group had problems. But nickel boron is the best coating you can put on a trash can.
Yeah, it's like I have the Mona Lisa, and like I'm gonna enhance her by drawing this, clown hat.
I won't stop. I try to be as neutral as I can about stuff, but there really are stuff in the market when it comes to the AR that needs to go away, and I really wish that that's one of them. It
Nickel
does
boron.
nothing.
Nickel boron and
Better.
aluminum gas blocks need to go away.
Yeah, nickel boron. I think I always give my students a homework assignment. I'm like, I go home and find me a nickel boron bolt carrier group by DD, BCM, Knights, LMT, Noveski, Colt, BECM, like any of like the accepted
Professional use,
like hard use duty rifles. Go find me a nickel boron bolt carrier group made by any of them, and they're like, well, that's this is premium. I'm like, a fucking Knights Armament bolt carrier group's like $550. You don't think they can afford to slap some nickel boron on there? And here's a test, guys. This is a cool test. So if anybody remembers Keymod, y'all remember Keymod, right? Okay, now what happened to Keymod when M-Lock came out? Like a fart in the wind, it was gone, right? Like as soon as M-Lock came out, it was demonstrably, objectively better. We knew that. And then almost everyone in the industry rapidly adopted it to stay competitive because it really was a better interface, okay? If nickel boron was the cat's ass, you can bet that we would all adopt it to stay, like competitive if it gave us some kind of real advantage. Same thing with piston-driven ARs. It's not that I have a problem with piston-driven ARs. I have a problem with people telling me that the piston-driven ARs is an empirically better gun. If it was, I promise you, we would have all adopted it by now. The inverse is actually more true. Most of your piston companies probably make more DI rifles now than they do on piston ARs. That's another really frustrating conversation that I've had on the internet.
That's a marketing win for sure on the piston-driven AR. Like, we should just do that. We should build the worst parts we possibly can and put a lot of marketing behind it. We're gonna make it's gonna be aluminum gas block with plastic set screws.
I'm gonna
coat it nickel boron.
I'm gonna build the Reddit super rifle.
This is it's the same conversation as do you do it in house, right? So if we did a piston rifle in house, it would be a better rifle now, right? Because the machining scraps are on our floor downstairs. Damn it.
That's right.
It's better, right?
Yep.
Okay.
The people that argue with me when they get offended when I sort of jab at them about nickel boron, and I have a lot of students that come to classes with stuff that's nickel boron. We can make it work, but I see more issues with carrier key screws failing when we test them. I see more issues with dimension. The coating isn't factored into the dimension of the machine parts, and we have issues with headspace and bolt face diameter and the ejector seizing up and all these other problems that you don't see as much with other coatings. The companies that have pushed it for years as something better, my opinion is they can't walk it back, because now they look like they sold a bag of smut to everybody.
Yeah, they're committed to it.
No,
they're smut peddlers.
So for what I've noticed is that even if the coating in and of itself was not a bad idea, which I think that it is, but even if it wasn't, no coating will make a bad bolt carrier group good. So I mean, if you coat a cat turd, now you have a shiny cat turd. I don't know if I just want to put that in my fucking rifle. One of the indications when I look at something that's made of nickel boron, I look at the kind of company that would choose nickel boron as an option, and I bet you the carrier, the substrate material underneath, the actual tolerances, all of the other important things, that go into that, I bet you those were done poorly, because I don't think anybody serious would pick that as an option. So I don't know. I mean,
those of you who make nickel boron, I'm not attacking you.
I am. We're still friends.
The smut peddlers that don't like lube.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
That's another thing too. And there was a certain company that advertised a lubeless rifle, that this rifle requires zero lubrication.
They still do, don't they?
I'm not gonna let me just go.
Okay.
So let me just, and I remember joking, thinking to myself, like, this company, they found the solution that F1, like racing and NASA hasn't been able to crack,
Yeah.
But I'm not talking shit. Like, I mean, because like, honestly, there are certain companies that do a lot to solidify in common use, and we're up here like, kind of being dicks, joking around with each other for the most part. We all, we're all in this together and we have a good time. But I guess we guys were be able to share some of our personal thoughts on things.
I found it to be really interesting. Like when I went through the son's class, 3 times as a student, when I went through Chad's class as a student, and sitting in that environment and like thinking of like that super grunt situation where the dude goes out and drops, thousands on these super exotic parts. And it's like, he usually ends up being the guy that needs to borrow something out of our little toolkit to get the gun to go together, right? And it's been really interesting when you're in that environment. You got, whether it's 5 students or 20 students or whatever, and you see, because we don't gatekeep our class, right? You don't have to have our gun to come to our armorer's class, right?
And I don't even. And by the way, I don't even teach the class as a Sons Liberty class. Like, I use my competitors as examples, like in a good way. Like, hey, like I like what BCM does here. I like what LMT does here. I mean, like, it's not a Sons Liberty product push. It's a standards push.
But yeah, but no, it's like but it's always interesting that the guy, this is a better product, so I use it. And then like, you get to the assembly, or you get to the gauging, or you get to whatever it is, and the dude's like, has that like sad face, and he's like, oh damn, like I've got an issue here. And it's really interesting when you start having access to that sample size where it starts to grow, right? And you start to compare it, and you're like, well, why does this guy, why is his stuff working just fine, and this expensive stuff over here isn't? And it really, that whole tier chart thing, it's I think that the more you get out there, whether it's to a carbine class where you see 20 guns on a line running 500 rounds before you break for lunch, right? Or you're in that assembly class and you see, people checking the length of their carrier keys and making sure that the gas key's not slamming off of the receivers and stuff like that. When you knowledgeably start looking at things that are being empirically measured, like, you cannot argue with that. You can't unsee it. You can't put that back in the bottle.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, and for me, the ultimate goal, I think everybody here agrees, like, we want to see all Americans, armed, and I mean, and no one company can do that. There's a cooperative effort in my parts, like, to truly ensure, like, the in common use thing. So I don't have any kind of personal grudges against really anybody. We have different approaches. I mean, I have a different approach on how to solve a certain issue than somebody else. But at the same time, like, some of this is just fucking around and poking fun at our our peers and stuff, right? But what I will say is, for anybody out there that's curious, like if you're gonna seek out information on a gun, whether it's any gun, whoever, like try to find a source that has, they're using their real name. Like that's hey, like I'm Mike Mahalski and I'm standing behind this curriculum. I'm putting my name on this curriculum, and so I'm giving this advice about the torque value of this, and it's me. And the curriculum that I teach, might have to stand up to cross-examination, right? If you're doing an accredited class for a government agency. If you're going to seek information from anybody, like Chad and whatever, we put our actual name behind the advice that we're giving you. If the person on a forum is not using their real name, or if it's based just on likes, let me tell you, man, that information might be most correct. I've seen it many times in a chain full of 100 different answers to a question. The most technically correct answer has the least amount of likes.
Yeah, I mean,
and the shittiest, kind of most bizarre, how the fuck did you get there? Answer has 70 likes, and then now the person who went to this place to get legitimate information to try to maybe make a decision or fix a problem, he's going to it becomes a popularity contest as opposed to a true data thing. Again, wherever you seek your information, I would try to at least vet that, and then some of the places that have the most like collection of great information, they might not always be the funnest place to hang out. I give the guys over at primary and secondary some shit because they're, that's not exactly a fun place to hang out, like memes and stuff like that. But the information is vetted. I mean, it's good quality information.
That wasn't really something that was, when we started as Will Larson, but even before that, it's come a long way in the last 15 years. Just instruction in general, whether it be shooting or armor's class. You got Chad, you got you. You kind of.
So there's Sully. They have the Colt classes still.
Yeah.
There's another class. I forget the name of it now, but I've heard really, really good things about what other good armorers classes are out there that are.
Well, something I've never heard anything bad about is Rob Gee. He teaches the armorers classes for LaRue.
Yeah.
He came from the DOE. So he was again sort of like me. So I guess you could say I'm sticking up for him. But he was trained as a gunsmith and then started teaching stuff. So I see a lot of similarities in how people have described their learning experience with him. So I'm signed up to take his class too. I'm a perpetual student. I will continue to learn from everybody I can. And you see this from people that classify themselves as experts. They're like, well, I'd never take that class. I'd never take that class. I don't have anything to learn. Don't ever listen to those people.
Yeah. No, I'm in class right now, in your class right now, taking notes. When we get down, I have pages full of notes because, that's a technique that I had not thought of. That's a gauge I really need to get. Or hey, that's a good idea. I didn't think about how that carrier drag is. Okay,
we've seen it, right? But we necessarily couldn't explain it
or quantify it or measure it, or build around it. Now, whenever I go do their engineering prints on this new thing that we're working on, I can have them fix that in the engineering and avoid it. Yeah,
thinking about what we were saying with the forums and where knowledge has gone from, right? So try to rewind it a little bit to the tier chart, but I can remember back to the late 2000s when you had the M4 carbine, the original tier chart, right? And I almost think it was initially a good thing, right? Because the knowledge level of the buyer of the AR was not where it is now, right? People weren't necessarily going into a gun store and asking, hey, does this gun have an H buffer or carbine buffer, right? They weren't even aware that mattered. And so by starting to talk about things, right, and it got a little pedantic, do they Parkerize under the front sight base, right? It got a little crazy, but it got people starting to ask the questions about what is actually in this gun. And I think in some good way, it started to get people to start asking more questions about what's going inside and start looking under the hood and not just the logo on the side.
I'm glad you brought that up because M4 carbine, in my opinion, is still one of the better repositories of good information, pretty pretty dialed in commentators. I mean, the conversation on M4 carbine, I think, is elevated as to most forums and to most places.
And on it, to build on that too, like what's nice is that like it existed and was active in the early days, right? Before some of the products that before the A5 system busted onto the market and stuff like that. And so you can go back through time, right, and see what did somebody think of this system in 2010?
No, if you go to M4 carbine right now and you were to search it, Paul Buffoni is answering the questions. Paul Buffoni is the owner and founder of BCM.
Yeah,
he's in there answering questions. So is Bill Geisley. So are a lot of people, right? And then you can go and see when like Jim was saying, when certain products were just kind of coming out, into their infancy. And what's funny is you can see all of the doubt, no, fuck that, blah, blah, whatever. And now they're products that people swear by.
Yeah, go back to 2009 and read what people thought of piston-fed ARs. And I just got this piston conversion kit.
Shit, go look at what they think about the mid-gas system. What's awesome, it's M4 carbine, an amazing repository. It's kind of a cool history journey. And then you get to go. There's some of the old interviews there with John Noveski, which is really kind of cool stuff. See how far ahead of his time he was. I think a lot of people that are newer to this, they forget where the origins. Like we had Kevin Birmingham on here. Yeah. People didn't realize that dude brought 300 blackout to the world.
Yeah, I can remember I had back and forth PMs. I probably still have them saved with what's his name? The guy that worked with Kevin over there on the ammunition side. Ron or Rob
Silver?
Yeah. He PM'd back and forth with me when I had questions about okay, what's subsonic performance look like and what projectiles should I be looking at for that performance? You had the Larry Vickers was active over there for years too. There were a lot of great minds that were on there that contributed a lot, and it's cool to be able to search back through that, right? And you kind of lose that, I think, in social media, right?
Well, not just that, dude. Speaking of social media, but M4 carbine, places like that, they're going to be the lifeboat because our days on social media are fucking limited.
Yeah.
Every morning I get up, make a cup of coffee, log into Instagram to make sure our page is still there. That's my morning ritual, right?
Yeah.
And so at some point one day I know that it's not going to be there anymore. And luckily we have resources like M4 car. What you have your own site. You have your own. So Chad has an amazing repository of information. What is your site again?
We call it SOTAR Society. SOTAR is not anything official. It's just an abbreviation, like when people say SLGW.
Right.
There's other companies that are actually called SOTAR. They make boats, like the rubber rafts that Navy SEALs use. That's a SOTAR.
The whitewater rafting thing and stuff.
So so we have our website, but we have our own social community right there on the.
Can you click on that?
And it's called SOTAR Society.
Up.
And essentially, what we did that for, and I got some crap for this. They're like, "Well, the reason you ran off to this, Chad, is because you can't handle the heat when people actually put you into the fire." And I made this because I was being attacked, and I don't even post a quarter of the controversial stuff that you do, right? Yeah. But I was being restricted, held back on different social media, and I'm like, you know what? I need a backup. Yeah. We control the servers on this. Everything is ours. Nobody can stop me from saying whatever I want. So we have something that it behaves very much like Facebook. So you can have a feed on your own page, and then you can connect with people. And you can post in different subgroups. It's not Facebook, but I'm just saying. It's
that's
good.
The reason Facebook is because it's so user friendly.
Yes, and people are moving away from things like forums. Not to say that they're obsolete, but it's sort of like our generation, right? The younger people want to use things that are different than forums. They don't use that, so you sort of have to move with the flow of how things are used, and that's what I did as a backup. I don't post as much stuff on there as I do maybe on Facebook, and it's because I have a very select window of people. Most of the people in that group are students.
Right. We
have about 1,100 people in the private group. It's not big numbers wise.
You don't got to dumb it down like you do on Facebook.
But guess what? I've never had to do the whole time that we've run this. It's almost 2 years now.
Block or delete someone?
Not once.
Yeah.
Not once. So that goes to show you how you can create a culture of learning without being a massive dick about everything that you do. Yeah. And that turns off a lot of people. right? A lot of people could learn, but and there's a lot of really smart, experienced people in the gun business, and out of the gate, they're hostile. And it's like you cannot teach people that way. People will not be receptive if you're a jerk towards them. And then when you tell them to behave, they're like, well, who the hell are you? And I'm like, well, you can't participate in what I do because my forum, I'm not being a dictator. I'm trying to extend my classroom to this, and people just aren't jerks to each other. Yeah. Even if you don't like each other, even if you disagree with whatever that dude's building on the table across there, you don't say, hey, dude, are you mentally handicapped? What's wrong with your part? You poor? Like, that doesn't happen in a classroom environment. Does it happen in your classes?
No, I would just beat them, with the fucking
20-inch barrels coming out.
All the classes that you've taught, have you ever run into people like arguing, being jerks to each other about their part selection?
Oddly enough, man, I can walk through SHOT Show for 5 days in a row from everybody in the industry. I go to classes, I go to shooting events, we go to massive things. Everybody's like super cordial, whatever. You get online, and then like 1 out of 4 comments is like, fuck you, poor mid-tier. You didn't make that, like, and then I wonder like the good. What that tells me is like the toxicity of the internet. Those people don't actually go out into like the public or something.
They're performing on the internet. That's what it is.
Yeah,
showing off.
Yeah. It's some dude in his basement, like he probably,
We're getting back to your point about like, who do you believe? The guy with the most thumbs up, or the guy with the succinct, thorough explanation?
Or the guy that put his fucking name on the answer.
Right.
I'm like, and I believe this because of these reasons here, and and then, retard 696, like, oh, fuck you, poor. I'm like, okay, well, that was valuable too. Thank you, sir.
Mom, you see what I did? I call that guy poor.
Well, guys,
I could make a post about, all right, here's the thing to look for on an extractor to get good performance out of it. And it could be like 3 paragraphs long. I'll get 3 comments and 60 likes. Mm-hmm. And then my post about, nickel boron's trash is like 200 comments and everybody's like sharing it.
People like the violence, dude. That's what it is.
It's exciting.
Wake up and choose violence.
We've been trained. It's very Pavlovian. We've all been trained to kind of watch the train wreck.
So with that, right, and like on your forum, the things that I've noticed is that like you can ask a question, and in like very short order, and in like 1 or 2 replies, get a very technical, thorough, like everything you had a question about has been answered very quickly. And you don't have like the 9-page thread of like why are you even trying to do that? Why didn't you just buy this instead? And arguing with that dude about it. So no, like your resource is definitely something that like I've consulted at times when like there's something I'm a little unsure. I'm just like, I'll just check SOTAR, like because you don't have that noise. Like it's just signal. Right?
There is no, and a lot of people will answer exactly how I would answer. So if I'm not available because I'm teaching a class or I'm working on something or life, right? Literally like 99% of my students will answer just like I would. So it's like, well, this is great, right? They're doing the work along with me and they're helping people, which is the whole reason I'm teaching, is to, elevate that level of understanding of the weapon. Not everybody wants that level of understanding, but they're willing to do it. Where if you take someone who watches my YouTube channel, right, feverishly, they don't always understand the how and the why. They never sat down with me and had that longer conversation. And they'll give an answer that's completely out of context. The reason why I teach to do this,
right?
Or they get it twisted. Like you're telling me everybody makes junk. I never said that in a video, but that's their perception of what I said, and they get hostile about it. Like we talked about, it's like I don't like this. What did you say about my mom?
yeah, it's weird. I don't know if there's any other thing that people get that emotionally attached to, right? I mean, if you were giving somebody advice on how to change a carburetor,
car brands,
or maybe I guess car brands, yeah. I mean, like what's funny is that there does seem to be like an emotional attachment or some type of like really kind of personal involvement with gun brands, which no, I mean I'm kind of biased. I think those guys at Suns are pretty good.
We do okay.
But anyways, guys, it's been a blast, man. Highly suggest checking out Chad's stuff on SOTAR, School to American Rifle. If you get a chance to get a class with them, I highly dig it. If you've ever taken one of my classes, like taking Chad's class after that, it kind of gives you just a much more kind of complete rounding out the picture of things. So we're really happy to have you down here in San Antonio, man. It's been way overdue.
It's been an honor, really.
We're looking forward to it. Hey, I need to make sure I get some more paper. I think I'm running out of paper from taking notes, dude.
It's time to get back to class.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for joining us today right here at the Liberty Tree Studio. But be sure to visit us at solgw.com for hard-use blasters, badass swag, and much, much more.